Hello and welcome to another edition of the Lynn Lowdown. We got some special guests with us. Black History exhibit. Got the Lynn Museum here. We have Iris, we have Doneeca, we have Richard here. We're gonna talk about the Black History exhibit that they got at the Lynn Museum. How's everybody doing on this lovely Friday?
Doing great. Thank you.
Fantastic.
All right, awesome. First, let's talk about this exhibit. Just just can we first talk about the beginning phases of it? How long did it take you guys? What were some of the conversations that you all had when you in creating this exhibit?
I'm going to say I'm a newcomer to the project since I joined the museum as director in October of 2019. Feels like a blur already.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Iris or Richard, if you want to take this question, since you've been on the team longer than I have.
Well, I'll take the question. Basically, it's been 3 years. It was started with under a different director. It was a different team, and in the beginning, it was probably a team, and you can correct me, Richard, of 6 people in addition to the museum people, and we started out just saying that it was important for us to do an exhibit chronicling the history of Blacks in Lynn, and that we needed to start meeting and figure out just exactly what that was going to look like. So there were quite a lot of meetings, and there were people who didn't stay with it until this point either. For various reasons, they dropped off.
Gotcha. Oh, Richard, can you expound on that?
On the on what Iris said about like how we started off.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And of course too, like in addition, like there's always this conversation about representation being needed. And then just like the conversation of how like everything in the museum is super white. And so like I'm on the committee like as a volunteer. And even like before being a part of this committee, I was like, wow, the Lynn Museum has a lot of white people, and Frederick Douglass, of course. And like Jan Matzellager. But then it's like it's not very representative of the Lynn community as a whole. So it's like clearly we're missing something. And I think a lot of other people who were early in the committee, they have that same energy. They're just like, wow, I think we need something for us. Not even I think, we need something for us, for people.
I think I would agree with that, because one of the things that always struck me was that the museum was about the history mainly of the founders. And as we know, the founders were not people of color. And that seemed to be the primary focus. And in order to engage a city that was vastly different in the population, in the diversity of its population, the museum would have to look at what is the other history. Were there Black people here way back when the founders were here?
And Doneeca, when you taking over in 2019 and making sure this thing kept, there was still a pulse on this thing, what was important for you just to make sure that this didn't get put in the back burner? Because sometimes when you start something, people start dropping out, and then it just gets pushed to the side and people move on to other things. Why was it important that you just made sure you stayed on top of this when you got on as a director?
Well, I mean, as the first director of color for the organization, and as a Black Lynner myself, I felt like it was extremely important that the project happened. Getting caught up to speed. Unfortunately, Sue couldn't be with us. Sue Walker, who's our public engagement coordinator, she on the museum team is one of I feel like the last original folks of the museum staff that was working with this exhibition community committee to get things going. It's been a process. It's been a labor of love, but I think most importantly, the histories that we are sharing, the stories that we are sharing, even I didn't know, growing up in Lynn, my family's lived here for generations, at least on my mom's side, pre-Civil War, my family has lived here. And there are these stories that I just have never encountered, even, going to Lynn public schools, and you learn about Lynn history locally in 3rd grade. And there were just so many pieces of information that I just hadn't come across, especially the fact that, Lynn once had slaves. We did have quite a number of freed Blacks who lived in Lynn. Lynn's Black community, I feel like, is small but mighty, and it has kind of remained that way from the beginning. So to see how that community has just been resilient and continued to exist in this community as we've grown, and we're now a gateway city, we have a huge immigrant population, but the Black community still remains, and so it's something to celebrate. And being part of this process, I'm very thankful that I got to help unearth these stories, being from Lynn myself. So we're excited. It's amazing that we're here, especially after the year that 2020 has been, to finally pull this off and be where we're at with the exhibition is incredible.
And when people talk about Lynn, as far as, persons of color, they always bring up Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass is probably the most popular person that people bring up. But who are some of the other people that people should know about that they'll see at this exhibit?
So I would definitely say Jan Matzellager. Jan Matzellager is a kind of a staple here at the museum. His story is featured as part of our industry and craft exhibition, which looks at the ways Lynners have worked from the colonial period, kind of through industrialization, getting to GE and the Lynn Hospital. And he invented the shoe lasting machine, which completely revolutionized the shoe industry, which is what people largely know. But what a lot of people don't know is that he was actually born a slave. His mother was a slave. His father was white. He was a Dutchman. And eventually he was adopted by his father's family and was able to, gain skills to become a skilled laborer before emigrating to Philadelphia and then ultimately landing in Lynn. And then I think, with the early presence of slaves in Lynn, there's only so much information that we're able to capture, within our own collection. What we have a collection of over 10,000 objects. It's what people have donated to us over time. I don't know that historically as an organization, we've ever had targeted collecting practices to really fill in the gaps of history that we don't have. But, we have early records and early documents. And so we know, through Alonzo Lewis, who was the first historian of Lynn, he has an excerpt in one of his early writings that actually lists every family in Lynn that had a slave and the name of that slave. So, we have these early identities. The Ruffin family, which I feel like is one of the more prominent freed Black families that we know of in Lynn. Fortunately, their descendants donated a bunch of family ephemera, from photographs, receipt papers from Philip Ruffin's barbershop that he had here in Lynn. I believe we have the deed to their house that was here in Lynn. So, we have these tidbits of information, and from that, we've been able to, put together at least these early histories. And then we had story share days, which I feel like Iris and Richard can speak to, because that's something that I wasn't personally here for, but that's where we were able to capture some of the stories from the community today.
The story share days, those were it was like once a week, every other week. It happened on the weekends.
We only had 2 of them.
I think we were at one of those.
Yes,
Yeah.
because actually part of the story share was not only asking people to bring in the ephemera, bring in pictures, bring in, and they could tell their stories on Lynn Community Television.
Yeah.
So you were, a big part of that, actually. And there were a number of people who were delighted to do that. I think it was interesting that we had 2 different reactions. We had people who were immediately suspicious of what is this all about and why would they be doing this? And then we had people who just were delighted that they could be seen and heard and be a part of something that hadn't been done before. I mean, we all think about the hidden figures and the things that we didn't know that Black people accomplished or that they were a part of in the country's history. Well, I think there's so much that people would be surprised about the Black history right here in their own city.
Richard, how much did you learn from all this? How much new information did you get from all of this?
So much, like from the beginning, honestly, like from the moment I walked into the museum. So to begin with, like Jan Matzellager blew my mind, because like who knew that the person who revolutionized like creating shoes in this city, putting us on the map, was a Black person. Like I've lived here forever, 27 years strong, and I didn't know this because I honestly I didn't learn about it in school. I knew nothing of it. So like as far as like finding like roots in my city, like they were kind of non-existent. Like I knew I lived here, but I didn't know like what actual contribution people like me made. You know, because like no one tells you. But every other thing, like every other week was like something new. It's like, oh, we have these families who have been here like again like post Civil Wars. Like I didn't know that. I'm not a historian. I'm a volunteer. I work with kids, so I get to tell them these stories. Yeah, like all my Black and brown kids. Like, hey, did y'all know? Look at your feet. We have shoes. Guess what? Like it's the most exciting thing because nothing. I knew nothing. Yeah, and then all of a sudden I'm just bombarded with information. And that's also important that you work with the young folks now. Now they get the chance to learn this, and they'll have to learn it maybe when they go in college. Or they start off young when they know this stuff, so they could, they could see what just the accomplishments that certain people had in this city. Because just like you, I didn't know that either. All right. All right. So talk about the museum's still closed, but for people, how are they gonna be able to see the exhibit?
Yes, so we, upon the governor's news yesterday, the state of Massachusetts is going back to phase 3, step 2, starting Monday. So that means that we will finally be able to reopen, which is really, really exciting. So I don't have a specific date yet since we just found out that information. Obviously, I have to work with the board, which I'll see Iris next Wednesday at our board meeting, and then also work with our health department to make sure that I understand what capacity is. So for now, just staying engaged online. We've been really active for Black History Month. We've had weekly craft pickups here at the museum. We've been really engaged on social media. Another shout out to Sue, who's been posting images and facts about Black history here in Lynn. We had a great Mesa program earlier this month, and I was actually part of a panel discussion with North Shore Juneteenth Association last night on Black excellence. So we have a couple of virtual programs in the works for next month. So just stay tuned on our social media and our website for more, but hoping to release a reopening date, at least, in the next couple of weeks.
And as far as Black exhibits, are there some that you guys will plan on working on for the future that's maybe you're brainstorming now that you can talk about, if there's any?
I mean, I would love to do more exhibits like this that really speak to the different demographics that we have here in the community. I know back in 2012, we hosted the More Than a Number exhibition, which really spoke to our Cambodian community and, the genocide that happened in Cambodia and the refugee population that ended up here in Lynn, because I believe Lynn has the 3rd largest Cambodian population. So some friends of mine that I've gone to school with have since started a sort of like cultural identity, sort of heritage project around, their identity as Cambodian Americans and what does that mean and what does that look like. So hopefully we can do a project with them later this year. But specifically with Black history, Untold Stories is just the beginning. And so, the exhibition will be up for at least a year. And then as we continue to develop and grow and hopefully more folks will feel comfortable and build that trust to share their stories with us, we can continue to grow this exhibition over time.
All right, definitely, please.
This is more the first test of that kind of thing. I think that they'll be surprised at how they are seen and heard. And it's no longer a mystery. People think they know, all of their community, but this is a really good opportunity for people to learn very interesting things about, one of the rich communities within this diverse city.
Definitely. And lastly, before you go, I just want to get all 3 of your thoughts. Do you think that we're getting better with the representation when we do stuff like this? You guys see that the representation maybe is slightly improving?
I mean, I think we're making steps. me being in this position, I think, is the leaps and bounds, but I think there's a lot of organizations across our city that need to prioritize diversifying their staff and ultimately their leadership, because I think a lot of our young people are coming back to the city. You know, they've gotten their education, they're ready to take on these new roles, but the roles really aren't readily available. So how do we extend these opportunities, especially to our young people of color, to give back to their community and take on more of responsibility and ownership of our spaces, of our politics, and our future, ultimately?
It's a very good point.
That was a great response.
There you go. Well, all right, there it is. there it is. All right, can you just plug in the website, the social media for the museum before we get out of here?
I can most definitely do that. It's lynnmuseum.org. No www dot, that'll take you to a non-existent website. And then you can follow us on social media at Lynn Museum. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
All right. Thank you all very much for taking the time out your day to chat with me about this. I'm definitely looking forward to checking out that exhibit. So once again, thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
No problem. You guys will be watching the Lynn Lowdown. Have a great day.